What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with a look at recent CGC 9.8 graded comic books that have sold on eBay. Not just Star Wars this time. We've got a lot of key issues here, some kind of secondary keys, a few good ideas for those of you looking, both cheap and expensive. And as always, make sure to go check out Jerry at Team CGC 9.8. He's another YouTuber, and he's back in action. I love it. I've been watching his videos religiously. He always has great ideas for comic books in a buyer's market. This is absolutely a buyer's market, and I've been selling off some modern graded vintage collection items to kind of put together a fund here as a lot of this stuff comes up for sale. I'm not sure what I'm going to get yet. I'm not sure yet, but I've got some thoughts as we go through these, some tips to think about as you're looking at stuff on eBay, Comic Link, Heritage, Hakes, lots of really good spots, Comic Connect, just amazing ideas out there, amazing deals out there. So let's go ahead and dig in. And again, I've got some Star Wars books, but I also have some non-Star Wars books because I heard you loud and clear and you wanted to kind of me to cover more graded comics that are just not Star Wars. And this is kind of an interesting one that I haven't really talked about in the past, but it's on my radar. I'm not saying I'm going to buy it, but most of the ones I'm covering today are auctions, but this one was a buy it now for $330. And this is from 1978, Amazing Spider-Man 181. This is the origin of Spider-Man retold. I believe they also did that in issue number 200, but don't quote me on that. There's another origin kind of retelling in that book as well. But this one didn't have perfect centering. You can see it's got a little bit of an overwrap, but it's a great cover. It's got Lizard, Doctor Doom, Doc Ock, and I guess that's Kingpin on the far right. Pretty great looking book though. The pain and the power, it kind of harkens back to with great power comes great responsibilities, probably at the gravesite for, I would assume, you know, his aunt and uncle there, but I guess it could be Gwen Stacy. But anyway, just a great looking book. And this was the 9.8 white pages, as all of these are. All the prices I'm quoting are in US dollars. Again, it's $330. I haven't looked up the GPA on this one, but that seems like a pretty decent deal on a 1978 book. And it's the origin retold. So that's one to look out for. And also check out, I think, issue number 200, if memory serves. Next up, this is one I do want to add to my ASM 238, which is the first appearance of Hobgoblin. This is 239, which is the first fight between Spider-Man and Hobgoblin. And it also has the first, not the first, but an appearance of Madam Web. And this one was the newsstand. I think if I'm going to get this one, it's going to be the newsstand edition. There's just so many of them on the census that why not go ahead and go for the newsstand, especially at this price. $244.50 is what this one sold for in an auction. Now, a few months ago, this was going kind of $300, $325-ish. So like everything, it's come down a little bit. But just another good idea if you want some kind of Hobgoblin love in your collection, but you don't want to spend $1,600 for a 9.8 of ASM 238. Get the next issue, 239 in a newsstand, $244.50. Great price, great cover. That's a buy. I'd buy that all day long. ASM 361. This is the first appearance of Carnage. And this is the newsstand. I think if you're going to get this book, again, get the newsstand because there are so many of them on the census. That's something that Jerry over at Team CGC 9.8 always preaches. And if you look at the census, I mean, there are boatloads of these, both in a newsstand as well as in the direct. But go ahead and get the newsstand edition. This one sold for $557, and that's kind of about the going rate. I've seen maybe as low. You might get lucky and get it around $500. I've seen as high as $575 on Comic Link. But you know, this is one that you really got to look closely at the left-hand side by the spine, because there's a lot of overwraps and underwraps and miswraps. And to me, spend the extra $25 to $50 and get one that's perfectly centered like this one was. It had a very, very slight overwrap, as you can see at the very bottom there. But in general, I mean, this is good enough for me. But some of them get really wonky, so just be on the lookout for that. Next up, Batman 359. This is the first cover, cover appearance of Killer Croc with his face revealed. I think it's Detective Comics 525 that might not have his full appearance, or it's one of those books kind of slightly earlier than this one. But this one really shows Killer Croc there, and it's also kind of you get a little bit of a rogues gallery feel to it because you got the Joker, Penguin, the Mad Hatter, Scarecrow, Riddler. I mean, it's just an awesome cover. And in 24 hours, I will murder the Batman, and Killer Croc will become Gotham's new king of crime. I love Killer Croc. I think his first appearance was Batman 357. And also check out Detective Comics 5, 23, 24, and 25. Those are all kind of key issues for Killer Croc. But this is a great cover. I love this one. And at the current price, I'd buy that. This is a buy it now, $220. Pretty decent price on that one. There's one listed right now for like $240 or best offer. So if you like this book, you can probably make that person an offer, but that's one I don't have and I would like to add. Detective Comics 880. This is one we just covered in my last Comic Link market update that sold for $406. This one sold for $430 in an auction. So this one is really holding its value, and it's tough to justify over $400 for this book because it's not a key issue. It's just one of those iconic covers from Jock. And it's one I definitely want to add. I've gone on record on that one. I love this cover. I think the CGC 9.8 ratio is like 45%, somewhere in that ballpark, which is fairly low, I guess, for a 2011 book. But it's just an awesome kind of haunting cover that I want to add. And it will be mine at some point. I'm not sure when. But to me, I'd rather go to Comic Link and avoid eBay sales taxes because this book comes up pretty regularly. So $430, I got to pay another 9.25% sales tax. That puts you at like $475 to $480 after shipping costs if I bought this on eBay versus $406 on Comic Link. You only add 3% buyer's premium and a very reasonable shipping fee. It's probably going to put you more like $430 all in on Comic Link. So I'll probably pick up some of these more expensive books on Comic Link and places like that. My Comic Shop is another good one because they only charge a 3% buyer's premium in their auctions or buy it now situations. So just keep all that stuff in mind. I mean, to me, I use eBay for lesser price books, kind of like 300 and under, ideally, just because the sales tax kills you with eBay. So here is Batman 404. This is one I just picked up. I paid $210 for mine because I was being impatient. And I knew if I'd been a little bit more patient, one would pop up with perfect. This is another one that you got to look out for the centering on the book. Lots of miswraps and overwraps for this book. This one had pretty good centering, fairly recently graded. And this is the origin of Bruce Wayne, obviously with the death of his parents, I forgot Thomas and Martha Wayne. So it shows their death there. And I think this is also the first modern appearance of Catwoman in Batman comics. So awesome Frank Miller story. And just an awesome book. And this one sold in an auction for $182.50. So $175, $185, somewhere in that ballpark is probably more fair. I paid about $210 because I found a perfect brand new. It was just graded like 2 weeks prior and perfectly centered. So I paid up a little bit. But if I'd just been patient, I probably could have gotten, $30 less. So anyway, that's a good book to look out for. You never see this one in a newsstand. I'd love to have that one in a newsstand. Here was a signed example of the same book. This one was signed by Frank Miller, who obviously did the story. And you see these pop up pretty regularly right now because I think he just did a signing at CGC. And they all sell for about the same price. I found several of them that all sold for between $425 and $450. This one sold for $445. And I like this one because it had like a blue ink, so you could really see his signature. Sometimes you see this one signed with like black ink or something, and it's hard to see the signature very well. So I think if I'm going to get this one signed by Frank Miller, I'd want it with like something that really pops like this, where it's like it really shows up nicely. So again, unsigned 9.8, $182.50. Signed, you got to pay a lot more for it, $445. But both, 404, Batman 404 is a good book. Here's another one in my collection, The Dark Knight Returns #1, another Frank Miller book. This one sold for $825, so this one's come back down a little bit. I've seen as low as $775, but again, I've talked about this. Make sure you look really close because the inner well on this one can get lots of scuffs. This one had a really clean back to it, but it's really hard to get this one super clean back from CGC, even freshly graded. But this one looked really, really good, and it was freshly graded. You can tell by the serial number there. For anything that's in the 420s, 430s has been freshly graded with their Generation 5 case. So this one was super clean and still sold for only $825. That's a price I'd pay all day long, but you might get it cheaper, but just keep in mind that you might be getting a book with scuffs to the inner well lining. That's one to really look out for the scuffs. Here's an idea for those of you who don't want to spend a lot of money right now. I don't know if this will ever be worth anything, but this cover is just awesome. This is an Alex Ross cover, and this was an SDCC exclusive for Batman 135. It just came out in July, for July of this year. This is the Ross variant cover C, but I believe this was only available at San Diego Comic-Con. Look how killer this cover is. I mean, this screams Jack Nicholson 1986 Batman. I love this cover, and you can see he's squirting the acid or, you know, something out of his flower there. It's got the Joker card, a really, really haunting cover, and it's come back down to earth. It was kind of going 150, 175, but as Jerry over at Team CGC 9.8, wait 3 to 5 or 6 months, and you can start getting them for closer to case cost. And, you know, you think about it, you send this into CGC to get pressed, cleaned, and graded. It's going to cost you $50 after shipping to and from CGC, minimum. And this one sold for $77 plus $10 shipping. Not much more than the cost of the book, plus pressing and grading costs. And it's an awesome cover. I mean, it really is. So I've seen them go for less than that though, but be careful on this one because the backs on this can have little scuffs and you can see the fingerprints on it from where some of the CGC grubbies decided to like touch it too much. And you can see fingerprints all over the back or like little scuffs on it. So be careful with this book because it's got a bright white back. And I've seen a number of these sell for like $40 because the backs are just covered in handprints. It looked like some kind of police murder scene with just handprints everywhere. They were dusting for prints. So make sure you get one that's super clean if you're going to pay up for it. So $77 on that one in an auction. Pretty awesome book though, and you know, not very expensive. And again, I don't know if it ever does anything, but I just think it's such an awesome cover that I would love to have that one. Alex Ross absolutely crushed it with this cover. That is such an awesome book. I love the kind of the water or the acid squirting out. You can really see it in the in the upper corner there. That book has to be mine. I mean, it's super cheap right now, so just keep an eye out for an auction. Star Wars books. Let's talk about them. Newsstand edition of Star Wars 42, the first Boba Fett, first full appearance of Yoda. This again was the newsstand in an auction, 1527. 1527. Folks, I went back and looked before I made this video. I went to Go Collect to see what the highest price paid was for a newsstand Star Wars 42 during the height of the Book of Boba Fett. $7,500. Somebody paid $7,500 for this book at one point. Now it's $1,527 for the newsstand. The direct editions are like $1,100 ish. So now's a good time to get this book. If you're Star Wars books have really come back down to earth. And to get the newsstand for $15.27 free shipping, that's a good buy right there. And this one was freshly graded. You can see the newsstand edition on the label there. So what a great deal on that one relative to, can you imagine paying $7,500 for this book and now it's worth $1,500? Ouch. Ouchie. That's a big hit. Here is the newsstand edition for Heir to the Empire. This one sold for $13.26 in an auction, so that one continues to come down. I think we documented one that sold for like $1,400 or $1,500. 3 months ago, it was like $1,800. Now it's $1,300, and I guess it could continue to drop now that Ahsoka has come and gone. Probably not going to hear much about Grand Admiral Thrawn for a while, so this book might drop even further. I don't know, but. The direct edition goes for about $700 to $800. That one's probably going to continue to drop as well. But not many of these are labeled on the census right now as newsstand, although there's probably more than what's in there, as Jerry mentioned in a video. But I think there's like 80 or so is what's listed on the census. But I've got this one in a direct. I wouldn't mind picking up a newsstand. If it gets down to like 1,100, maybe 1,000, somewhere in that ballpark, I'd probably pull the trigger on a newsstand edition. That's a good deal. Next up was Star Wars Tales number 23. This is the harder to find photo variant cover. This is the first comic book appearance of Darth Revan and Malak in cameo. And you're not hearing anything about these characters, so this is much more speculative of a book. And maybe not maybe it's not for you. I've got the painted cover, but I don't have this photo variant cover, and it's really come back down. It was kind of going 300-ish for a longest time, and now it's 155. So super, super cheap. I don't like this cover as much as the painted cover. I've got the painted cover. I just think it's a better cover, but this one's harder to get in a 9.8. It's all black on the edge there. So it shows up every little spine tick on it, but anyway, if you want that one, it's their first kind of cameo, Revan and Malak, and $155. You really can't beat that price for, a 2005 Dark Horse book. Next up, this is another book in my collection, and now's a really good time to get it. This is Knights of the Old Republic 42. This is the origin of Revan. I love this cover, Malik Unleashed. I'm in the middle of rereading the Expanded Universe books on Revan right now, so kind of top of mind for me. The lowest I've seen prior to this sale was about $275. This one sold for $242.50, so it's coming down. And I mean, this one got up to about $1,000, believe it or not, at one point. So $242.50, good time to buy this book right now. And I really do truly think that something's going to happen with Revan and Malik. They're kind of intertwined, right? If you read the books or read the Expanded Universe novels, Malik and Revan, their fates are intertwined, and if they ever do anything with them, like a Knights of the Old Republic type of mini-series, which would be awesome, or a movie, then they're natural fits because their storyline kind of fits in with Star Wars lore, right? It's kind of the rise and then fall to the dark side and then the redemption arc for Revan. So I could see them doing it eventually, and it may never happen. Either way, you get an awesome Dark Horse book from the mid 2000s that are fairly low printed and pretty awesome cover as well. So $242.50 on that one. Kanan the Last Padawan number 6, the first full appearance of the Rebels team. This one continues to drop, $255 in an auction. This one got up to like $800 or so. I think I pulled the trigger at like $600. So this one's really dropped, and I kind of took it on the chin on that one. Lots of them on the census, it is what it is, but I love the cover, and if you got to get it, now's a good time to do it before they do anything else with Sabine Wren or any of the other Rebels. But pretty great looking book and pretty easy to find and very regularly for sale on eBay in auctions, and maybe you get lucky and get it closer to $225, $200, somewhere in there. Tales of Teen Titans number 44. This one is when Dick Grayson becomes Nightwing, which I love Nightwing from... I think I'm obsessed with Nightwing because of the Arkham Asylum and Arkham City video games. His character was really fun to play with. He had a really cool moveset. So this is kind of a secondary book I'd like to pick up. Pretty easy to find, and this one's dropped like a rock. This one sold for $310 in an auction, and it was freshly graded, really clean copy. It's also the origin of Deathstroke, so pretty good idea for those of you looking in the direct edition. $310 on that one. Here's one I was curious to see where it would sell because it was an auction and it had a really old case style, but it's usually very, very expensive. And this is the first appearance of Star-Lord from Guardians of the Galaxy. This is Marvel Preview number 4 from 1976. And they do pop up occasionally in a 9.8. This one, again, had the old case style. It's like the oversized magazine. So I was just curious to see where this one would sell, because usually sellers are asking like $5,000, $4,000, $5,000 for it. This one sold in an auction for $21.84. $21.84. That's the cheapest I've seen for this book. And it's a stunner. Don't get me wrong. I probably would never want it just because it's kind of big and I wouldn't know where to put it. It wouldn't fit in any of my big boxes that I use for graded CGC books. But it is certainly an awesome book. And, if you're looking out there, you can probably expect to pay closer to $2,500 for a more recently graded, kind of updated label copy. But this one is bare bones, kind of like the rock bottom price of $21.84 for the first appearance of Star-Lord in any kind of comic or kind of magazine. Marvel Preview number 4 from 1976. All right, here we go. We got some Wolverine books, which is kind of near and dear to my heart. I was curious to see where this one would sell. I got a weird story on this one. This is a newsstand for Hulk 340, which is kind of the second fight between Hulk and Wolverine. And it's the harder to find newsstand. It sold for $34.12 in an auction, 39 bids. Now, this one, you got to really be careful on, okay? Because I've done some research. I've talked to some people that own this book. This book gets a lot of feathering. You can see the feathering on the top of the book on the back. And for some reason, these newsstands were just poorly cut. And so sometimes you see these for sale. I came close to claiming one on Instagram, and it was just so poorly cut. It was like really rough edges. So you got to be careful. This one also had some really bad action going on in the lower right hand corner. It's hard to see it, but my tip is for these recently graded books, go to CGC's website and type in the certification number, and you can pull up photos that CGC takes. CGC photographs every book now, and you can type in the certification number, and you can zoom in high-res photos. And when I did that for this book, this one had a really wonky edge down here. It was really messed up, and it was like arguably a 9.4, honestly. And so the other interesting thing about this book is that before this auction ended, it showed up on Comic Link as coming soon for the November auction. Same certification number, everything. So I don't know what to make of that, folks. It was a little weird. So I stayed away from this one. I was going to stay away from it anyway because the book was really not a 9.8, if you ask me, between the feathering on the back of the book and then the wonky corner down here. But what really scared me, though, is that this book was automatically already still listed as coming soon on Comic Link, while at the same time being auctioned off on eBay. So something is way up with this book. So I'm staying away from it on Comic Link because I don't know what's going on there. But it did sell for $34.12. I've seen them for sale on Instagram for higher, usually $3,700, $3,800, $3,900 in that ballpark is about fair market value. You might be able to make an offer on one on Instagram. There was another one on Instagram I almost made an offer on, but luckily my buddy Jason pointed out that the top edge was miscut. And so the Incredible Hulk was right at the very top edge of the book. So this is a particular book that you got to be very, very, very careful on. The newsstand edition of Hulk 340. It gets lots of feathering on the edges, on the outside edges of the book, and then on the top. And this one had really, really bad ones. If you zoomed in on the CGC website, it was like really badly miscut. So that's a big pro tip for all of these recently graded books that start kind of in the 428, 430s. You can type them in on CGC's website and get high-res photos that you can really zoom in on to check out for spine ticks and any kind of like corner wear, things like that. So I stayed away from this one. I'm definitely staying away from it on Comic Link, just given all the mysterious hijinks going on. And it's just a tip that you can do now with a lot of these books. It's awesome that CGC is offering free photographs for any submission now. So it allows you to kind of really zoom in on the cases. Here was a really interesting one. This was a newsstand for Wolverine #1. This is the first Wolverine as patch, but you never see this one in a newsstand edition. So this was a newsstand, and it sold for big, big money. In a direct edition, this usually goes like $300. This one sold for $980 in an auction. So very, very tough to find, but it sold for essentially 3.5 times, 3.25 times what a direct goes for. So that just shows you how hard it is to find a newsstand for Wolverine #1 from 1988. So great cover. I'm not sure I'm going to be willing to pay $980 for this book. If I'm going to spend $980, I'm getting a direct for Wolverine, for Hulk 340. I'm not spending $1,000 on this book. I'm just not. So I would probably just I'd settle with a direct edition for a third of the price or less, and take that difference and get like a direct Wolverine limited series #1 in a 9.8, or put it towards a Hulk 340 in a direct edition in a 9.8. But that was a big, big number. And admittedly, it's very, very tough to find this one in a newsstand. But $980, that was shocking. Here's another one that Jerry talked about recently on his channel, Wolverine #8. I wouldn't mind picking this one up in a direct. This one sold best offer accepted for $330. I would have guessed it probably was around $300. That's usually where they sell for in an auction. Pretty awesome cover with Wolverine as patch, as well as Hulk as Joe Fixit. And pretty awesome cover there. So that's one I wouldn't mind picking up eventually. I probably want to pick up a newsstand of Wolverine Limited Series #1 before I go for this one. But in the newsstand for this book, that's another one that's very, very pricey. It's very much like Wolverine #1, the first patch. It sells for a lot of money, $800 to $900 pretty consistently. So, and that's another one that's very tough to find in a newsstand. So anyway, in a direct edition, though, about $300. Direct edition of New Mutants '98, the first appearance of Deadpool. This one sold for $14.26. Don't pay that, okay? That's crazy. Don't pay that right now. Plus, you got to pay eBay sales taxes. This was in an auction, $14.26 on Comic Link. They sell every single month, and you don't got to pay sales taxes. At least I don't, for living in Tennessee. And they're selling for about $200 or $300 less than that. $11.50, $12.50, $1,300, somewhere in that ballpark. So In my opinion, for these really expensive books that are very easy to find, like New Mutants 98 in a direct edition, they come up every single month on Comic Link. Just go to Comic Link, set up an account, set up your credit card. You only pay a 3% buyer's premium, and you don't have to pay sales taxes, at least where I live. So $14.26, that's way too much money for this book right now. It's really come back down, and $11.50 to $12.50 is probably closer to fair market value. Fantastic Four, $2.43. I wanted to do this one as a shout out to Jerry. This is one he has talked about recently. Pretty great looking book. This has got Galactus. It's a John Byrne cover with Fantastic Four and Doctor Strange and Thor and Captain America all fighting Galactus. Pretty cool cover. Pretty cool cover. I would imagine we'll see Galactus fairly soon. This one sold in an auction, bare bottom price of $172.50. I've seen them sell as high as about $211. This one was freshly graded, nicely centered as well. So pretty bare bones price at $172.50. You might get it cheaper if you wait a little while too. So pretty easy to find, but a pretty awesome cover. Next up was a newsstand edition of Daredevil 183. This is another Frank Miller cover and the harder to find newsstand. This is the first meeting of Punisher and Daredevil in comic books. And again, the harder to find newsstand, a very kind of simplified but beautiful cover that really pops. I'd love to have that one at some point. Newsstand edition, $465. The direct edition usually sells for about $200 or so. So that's another one that, again, it's a secondary key, so don't go crazy with it. But for the newsstand, that's what it sold for in an auction, $465. Another one that's kind of highly speculative that's come back down to earth, but I really love this cover. That's the third print of Venom #3. This is the first appearance of Null, which I've read that series of Venom books, and it's a great series by Stegman and Cates, and I love this cover. I mean, it's just an awesome cover. And there's been a lot of rumblings that we're going to see Null at some point in the MCU as kind of one of the next big villains. So if you're going to get it, though, if you're going to get Venom #3, get the third print because it's kind of his big cover appearance. He's sitting on like a throne, and he's holding like a skull in his hand. He just looks tough as hell. And everything about it is awesome. He's kind of like the god of symbiotes. I mean, it's just awesome. I love that cover. And this one's come back down to earth. It was kind of going $500, $550 a year ago. This one sold in an auction for $280. And shout out to Sparkle City Comics. That's an eBay seller I've bought from several times. Always bomb-proof packing. I've always been super happy with that seller. So not a sponsor of the channel or anything, but I wanted to talk about Sparkle City because they do great work. Simpsons Comics and Stories #1. This is the first comic book appearance of The Simpsons. Pretty awesome Bartman cover. This one sold in a bare bones auction. $355 in an auction, 16 bids. That one just closed on the 22nd. So that's another one that's come back down a little bit and pretty cool looking cover there. This is Welsh Publishing Group, so probably pretty low printed relative to what we see sometimes for some of the Marvel books of the same time period. So if you're into The Simpsons, I'm not really into The Simpsons, but that gives you a price target to aim for. And then finally, Uncanny X-Men 266 in the direct edition. First full appearance of Gambit in comics, another really nice book. And this one's kind of bounced a little bit. It got down to like 600-ish, 650. And this one sold in an auction, admittedly freshly graded, perfectly centered. So that tended to help a little bit. This one definitely had some sharpening of the photos. If you see, like, that's one tip also for eBay, is if you see like the CGC logo really kind of bright like that, and it just looks super sharp, the seller has taken the photos and then sharpened them, okay? There's some notorious sellers that do that, so be careful on that. But it did look really clean. I'm not trying to say it wasn't clean, but this one definitely had sharpened photos. This is not a legit kind of like taking a picture with my phone or scanning the slab using a slab scanner. So this one had definitely been sharpened. But that's still sold for $711, and so that's bounced a little bit. I think I've seen as low as $600 or so. Maybe even lower, but this one did sell in a direct edition, Uncanny X-Men 266, the first full appearance of Gambit, for $711 plus $25 shipping up in Canada. That's all I got for you. Long video, but I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again, as always, for watching, and I'll be back soon.